At a middle school on the outskirts of Seoul, Jungkook sat quietly in the corner of the classroom. His face was cold, almost expressionless, even as his classmates burst into laughter at a boy's silly joke. Not far from him, Park Yin sat uneasily. Her eyes darted toward a group of boys approaching her. "Hey Yin, why do you always bring weird lunches like that? Don't you know this is Korea? Not some other planet?" One of them mocked, pointing at her neatly decorated lunchbox tied with a small ribbon. "Yeah, it looks like a kindergarten kid's lunchbox." The boys laughed loudly, their tones full of mockery. "She's not a middle schooler, she's still in kindergarten." Yin bit her lip, unsure of how to respond. She was used to being the target of their jokes, but this time, the words stung more than usual. Tears welled up in her eyes as one of them reached out to grab her lunchbox. "Stop!" Jungkook's firm voice suddenly rang out, silencing the room. Jungkook rose from his seat and approached them. His icy gaze was enough to make the boy take a step back. "Don't you have anything better to do?" he said coldly, his tone carrying an unspoken threat. "If you touch that lunchbox again, I'll make sure you can't touch anything for a week." "Let's just leave," one of them whispered. The boys chuckled nervously before scurrying away, leaving Yin clutching her lunchbox tightly. "Jungkook, thank you," Yin said softly, her eyes still watery. Jungkook gave a short nod. "Next time, if they bother you, just call me, or better yet, yell at them yourself." Yin smiled faintly. "I don't know why they always pick on me, but I'm glad you're here." Jungkook didn't respond. He returned to his seat, but from that moment on, he always kept an eye on Yin, ensuring no one dared to bother her again. Their bond deepened over time. Their parents, who were old friends, often arranged family gatherings on weekends. Jungkook and Yin were often forced to play together as children, but as they grew older, these meetings felt more natural. One spring afternoon, they sat under a sakura tree in the park near Jungkook's house, where their families were gathered. Yin admired the falling petals, captivated, while Jungkook busied himself with a book. "Jungkook, look, this flower is so beautiful," Yin said, holding up a fallen petal. Jungkook glanced briefly before returning to his book. "It's just a flower. You're too easily impressed." Yin huffed lightly. "You're so unromantic. I bet even if I disappeared, you wouldn't care." Jungkook closed his book and looked at her seriously. "Wouldn't care? Who do you think has been protecting you all this time?" Yin chuckled. "You're so annoying, Jungkook, but I'm glad you're always by my side." Jungkook didn't reply, but the faint smile on his lips didn't escape Yin's notice. When they entered high school, their relationship remained close. Thanks to Jungkook's protection, Yin had grown more confident and started following him everywhere. Jungkook, with his cold demeanor, often found her presence annoying, but he never truly pushed her away. "Jungkook, we're in the same class again," Yin exclaimed excitedly when the class list was announced. Jungkook sighed. "Of course, you must have a special talent for showing up wherever I am." Yin laughed, ignoring the sarcasm in his voice. "That means I'm special, right? I'm the only girl who can be near you without you pushing me away." Jungkook glanced at her briefly before replying, "Maybe I'm just too lazy to fight you off." Yin felt special nonetheless. She was the only girl Jungkook allowed close, unlike the others who tried and failed to get his attention. With his cold reputation, Yin's presence deterred anyone else from bothering him. Since becoming close to Jungkook, no one dared to bully her anymore. By the time they entered college, they found themselves in the same class once again. Yin happily sat next to him, her presence keeping other girls from approaching Jungkook. "Yin, you've turned into my bodyguard. From middle school to college, you're always around," Jungkook remarked one day as they walked to class. "I prefer to call myself your personal protector. Besides, who else will protect you from your creepy admirers?" Yin replied proudly. "Think of it as my way of repaying you for always looking out for me." Jungkook shook his head, but deep down, he knew Yin's presence was irreplaceable. After all, trying to stop her would be pointless. She was far too stubborn. That morning, sunlight streamed into the open campus cafe, where students gathered to study or chat. Jungkook sat at one of the corner tables, his laptop open in front of him. He typed away at a group report with a serious expression, his fingers moving deftly across the keyboard. Across from him, Yin sat playing with the straw of her iced green tea, her gaze fixed on Jungkook. "Don't you ever get tired of studying all the time, Jungkook?" Yin asked suddenly, breaking the silence between them. Jungkook glanced up briefly. "I have a deadline. If you want to chat, go find someone else," he replied, his focus still on the screen. Yin pouted. "I've already told you. I don't like talking to anyone else. Besides, why would I when I have you?" Jungkook stopped typing and looked at Yin with a blank expression. Because I'm busy, Yin. Can't you give me some space? Don't you have a deadline for your own assignment? Why aren't you working on that? Yin paused for a moment, then gave a small smile. You're so cold, but I know you're not really mad at me. As for my deadline, I'll do it later at home. Jungkook sighed, trying to ignore her, but when Yin began tugging on his sleeve, his patience wore thin. He closed his laptop with a sharp motion, drawing the attention of a few students nearby. Yin, I'm serious, he said, his tone sharper than usual. You don't need to cling to me like this all the time. We're adults now. You're not a kid who needs me to protect you constantly. Please, try to read the situation. Yin's eyes widened at his words. What do you mean? She asked quietly. Jungkook took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. Back then, I protected you because you were always being bullied. But now, no one's going to bother you anymore. You can take care of yourself. You don't need me like you used to. And honestly, I can't always be there for you. Yin's smile slowly faded, replaced by a look of hurt. So, are you saying I'm bothering you? That's not what I meant, Jungkook replied quickly, but the damage was already done. Yin stood, grabbing her bag without another word. Her face looked crestfallen, and Jungkook noticed her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I'm sorry if I've been a burden. I won't bother you anymore, she said softly before turning to leave. Jungkook watched her retreating figure, a heavy feeling settling in his chest. He knew he had been too harsh. Before he could think twice, he stood up and chased after her. Yin, wait, he called, but she didn't stop. Yin, I said wait. Jungkook jogged to catch up and finally managed to block her path. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it that way, he said, his voice softer now. Yin looked up at him, tears now streaming down her cheeks. If you don't want me around, I can leave. I just don't know where else to go. You're the only person I have, Jungkook. You're the only one who's ever been close to me. Hearing her words, Jungkook felt a pang in his chest. He didn't know what to say. Taking a deep breath, he finally replied gently, I don't want you to leave. I just want you to learn how to stand on your own. That's all. But I don't know how, Jungkook, Yin said, her voice trembling. I've gotten too used to having you around. Jungkook fell silent for a moment before letting out a soft sigh. I'm not going anywhere, I promise. But I also want you to try not to rely on me too much. Can you do that? Start socializing with our other friends, not just interacting with them in class. Yin, not everyone is as mean as they were when we were kids. Yin looked at him hesitantly. You're serious? You won't leave me? Yes, I'm serious, Jungkook said with a firm nod. I'm not leaving you. Yin wiped her tears roughly. All right, but you'll have to be patient with me, okay? I'll try, but don't get mad if I mess up. A faint smile tugged at Jungkook's lips, the first since their conversation began that morning. Deal. Now, let's go back. I'll treat you to some food. Yin's face brightened slightly, though her eyes were still wet. She stepped closer to Jungkook and clung to his arm. Jungkook sighed but didn't push her away. They walked back to the cafe, the tension between them slowly dissipating. Deep down, Jungkook knew he could never truly leave Yin. No matter how tough things got, he would always be there for her. That night, after Yin and Jungkook's graduation day at the university, the Jeon and Park families sat together in a grand living room. Jungkook sat stiffly next to his father, Mr. Jeon, a man with a stern face and sharp gaze. Across from them, Yin sat with a bright face, almost unable to hide her smile. Mr. Park, Yin's father, began the conversation. The reason we're gathered here is because we want to arrange your marriage. Yin almost jumped with joy but tried to maintain her composure. She glanced at Jungkook, who remained sitting silently with a neutral expression. I agree, Dad, Yin said cheerfully. I've always felt that Jungkook is the one who's meant for me. I wouldn't know what to do if it wasn't Jungkook who would be my husband. Jungkook turned his head, looking at Yin for a moment before looking back ahead. His face showed no emotion. Of course, this is the best decision for our families, Mr. Jeon said with an unquestionable tone. Jungkook, you understand how important this is, right? Jungkook slowly lifted his head, trying to keep a neutral expression. Yes, Dad, he replied briefly. Yin smiled even wider, unable to contain her excitement as she heard Jungkook's agreement. I've been dreaming of this day for so long. Finally, we'll be together forever, Jungkook. Jungkook forced himself to stay calm. Yes, I guess so, he said flatly. Yin slightly scoffed at Jungkook's emotionless reaction, but in just a few seconds, she smiled again, switching her gaze between the two fathers who were busy discussing their plans. After the meeting ended, Jungkook walked out of the house with his father. The cold night air greeted them, but it wasn't enough to cool the fire raging in Jungkook's heart. After a few steps, he stopped abruptly. "Dad," Jungkook called out firmly. Mr. Jeon paused, turning to his son with raised eyebrows. "What is it?" Taking a deep breath, Jungkook finally voiced his concern. "Why do I have to marry Yin so soon? I still want to focus on my career. This is happening too fast." Mr. Jeon's sharp gaze bore into him as if trying to read Jungkook's thoughts. "Your career will continue just fine. This arrangement isn't just about you two, Jungkook. It's about our family. The strength and stability we'll gain by uniting our families. Besides, haven't you been close since you were kids? What difference does it make if the marriage happens sooner?" "That's exactly why," Jungkook said, his voice tinged with frustration. "I know how she is. She'll want me to be with her all the time and won't accept it when I'm busy. Right now, I'm swamped with responsibilities at the company and the organization. Listening to her complaints will just make me more stressed." Mr. Jeon stepped closer, placing a firm hand on Jungkook's shoulder, the gesture heavier than mere reassurance. "You'll only be busy for a while, Jungkook, not all the time. By marrying Yin, both the company and the organization will stabilize faster because our families will support each other and grow stronger. This is mutually beneficial for everyone. I don't want to hear any more excuses. As for Yin's behavior, you need to guide her patiently and help her understand. This marriage will happen, and you will fulfill your duty as the son of the Jeon family." Jungkook lowered his head, exhaling softly. He knew arguing would only make things worse. "Yes, Dad," he finally replied in a subdued voice. The wedding day had finally arrived. With a forced smile on his face, Jungkook stood next to Yin, who was beaming brightly as she greeted the guests at their wedding. Their college friends approached them to offer their congratulations. "Congratulations on your wedding." Yin chuckled softly. "Thank you for coming." One of Yin's former classmates gave her a teasing look. "I always knew you two would end up getting married." The others nodded in agreement. "Isn't it obvious? You've been together for so long. Everyone on campus knew your relationship was special." Yin blushed at the remark, a shy smile gracing her face, while Jungkook maintained his usual neutral expression. After the wedding party ended, Jungkook and Yin arrived at their new mansion. In the master bedroom, Yin stood in the middle of the room, admiring the elegant space that now belonged to them. A happy smile graced her face as she took in her surroundings. Ever since she was a child, she had dreamed of this moment. Now, her marriage to Jungkook had finally become a reality. "I can't believe we're finally married," Yin said with a small laugh, turning to look at Jungkook, who was busy taking off his tie and tuxedo. "Doesn't it feel like a dream to you too?" Jungkook glanced at her briefly, his expression as composed as ever. "Maybe for you, but I never dreamed of this." His tone was flat, devoid of any emotion, though it wasn't meant to hurt her. He was simply stating the truth. Yin wasn't fazed by his words. She was used to Jungkook's aloof nature. She knew he wasn't the type to openly express his emotions, but she believed time would change that. "I know you might not have wanted this, but I'm happy, Jungkook. I'm genuinely happy to be married to you." Jungkook paused, his gaze softening slightly as he looked at her. "Do you really feel that way? No doubts at all?" Yin nodded confidently. "None. I know you might not feel the same way I do, but I truly believe this is the best thing for both of us." Jungkook let out a deep breath and moved closer to Yin, standing directly in front of her. His dark eyes bore into hers with an intensity that made her heart race. "If that's how you feel, then we'll live this marriage the way it's meant to be." Initially, Jungkook hadn't planned on touching Yin tonight. To him, this marriage had always been a business arrangement, a strategy to strengthen their family's positions. But now, as he stood in front of her, something shifted within him. A he hadn't anticipated began to stir. At first, he reminded himself of the original purpose of this union, family and business benefits. But then, he thought about how this situation wasn't just for their families, it was his marriage too. He had the right to shape it however he wanted. Besides, as Yin had just said, the woman standing before him had desired him and dreamed of this moment, and now that she was his wife, there was no reason not to take advantage of the situation they were in. With that thought, Jungkook reached out, cupping Yin's face gently but firmly. "You're mine now, Yin," he murmured, his voice low and full of meaning. "And tonight, I'm going to make you remember that." "Of course," Yin replied confidently. "I will do whatever it takes." Jungkook nodded slowly, then touched Yin's cheek with his hand. "All right, then, we'll begin this tonight, as husband and wife. And tonight, I want you." Jungkook's hoarse voice made Yin nervous but also sent shivers down her spine at the same time. Yin looked at him. There was something different in his gaze tonight. She had never seen him look at her like this before. She could see, in Jungkook's eyes, a faint that he was holding back. Yin bit her lower lip, trying to hide the nervousness that was starting to take over her. But underneath it all, there was a warm feeling slowly filling her heart. Tonight marked the beginning of her new life with Jungkook, the man who had always been in her heart and thoughts. Without saying anything more, Jungkook looked at her more intensely before finally leaning in. His face grew closer to hers until he cupped both of her cheeks with his hands. Her heart raced, and before she could think any further, Jungkook lowered his head and pressed his lips to hers. His kiss was gentle at first, but slowly deepened, becoming more intense. This was their first kiss. Yin was initially a little stiff, unsure of what to do, but her body slowly responded. Her hands instinctively rose, gripping his arm as if seeking something to hold on to. The kiss made her feel overwhelmed with emotions, nervousness, happiness, and feelings she had never experienced before. However, deep down, she never expected Jungkook to touch her like this, so differently from when they were just friends. Jungkook broke the kiss momentarily, looking at Yin, whose face was now flushed. Her lips were slightly parted, and her breath was a bit labored. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, the distance between them still very close. Yin just nodded slowly, unable to say anything. She knew that tonight would be a night she would remember for the rest of her life. Seeing Yin's small nod, Jungkook smiled faintly. He leaned in again, once more, but this time, it felt deeper, more possessive, as if to make sure that Yin was truly his now. Yin returned the kiss nervously, but a warmth began to grow inside her. Her hands, which were only holding onto his arm before, now slowly rose to wrap around his. Their touch felt so and the world around them seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them in that room. Jungkook stopped the kiss for a moment, his breath heavy. "You're mine now," he whispered hoarsely, his hand slowly touching the side of Yin's face before moving down to her shoulder. Yin swallowed, her face flushed, but she continued to look at him with eyes filled with both nervousness and trust. "I know," she answered softly, almost like a whisper. Jungkook smiled faintly at her response, then gently pulled her toward their bed. That night, for the first time, they Yin was happy because she thought Jungkook was starting to open his heart to her, hoping that after this, he would become warmer toward her. What she didn't know was that Jungkook was only taking advantage of the situation, using it for his own without any love involved. This was what Jungkook was thinking, without feeling guilty at all, because after all, this woman was his wife, and he knew she loved him very much. 3 months later, time passed by. It was late at night in their large house, a spacious and luxurious bedroom. Yin sat on the sofa near the window, staring at the night sky with a blank look. In her hands, an open book lay, but its contents were unreadable as her mind drifted elsewhere. The truth is, since they got married, Jungkook had become colder toward her. They did share the same room, but it was rare for her to actually sleep next to him. Jungkook was too busy with his work and the family business. "I miss you, Jungkook," Yin whispered softly. The bedroom door opened slowly. Jungkook entered, still wearing a black suit with his tie loosened. His face looked tired, his dimmed eyes showing that it had been a long day. "Sorry, I came home late again," he said briefly, taking off his suit and hanging it behind the door. Yin turned her body to face Jungkook, her eyes full of hope. "Jungkook, can we talk for a moment?" Jungkook paused for a moment, then turned to face her. "Now, Yin, I'm really tired. I have to leave early tomorrow morning. Can we talk later?" Yin let out a long sigh, trying to hold back the emotions she had been suppressing. "Jungkook, I've tried to be patient, but we hardly ever talk. You're always busy with your work. I'm your wife, but I feel like a guest in this house. I even feel like you don't consider me as being here." Jungkook let out a harsh sigh, clearly not wanting to argue. Just as he had suspected Yin, his wife, would be like this. That's why he never wanted to marry so quickly. If only his father hadn't forced him, but it was too late now, it had already happened. "Yin, I know this is hard for you, but I have big responsibilities. Everything I'm doing is also for us. Can't you understand that?" Yin stood up from her chair, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and sadness. "You're hardly ever here, Jungkook. Do you know how often I eat dinner alone? Or how many nights do I sleep by myself in this bed? And you're asking me to try to understand? You come home just to with me, and after you're sad and tired, you go straight to sleep. Oh, so tonight you came home. That means you probably want to do it again with me, right? Am I only here to by you, huh?" Jungkook looked at Yin with a cold stare, but there was a hint of guilt in his eyes. "I've told you from the start, this marriage isn't something I dreamed of. Those words pierced Yin's heart like a knife. Her eyes began to well up with tears. So, you married me just because our parents wanted it? Is that it? You didn't think about my feelings? Jungkook looked away, avoiding Yin's gaze. Yin, don't force me to say something that will hurt you. No, just say it. Yin stepped closer, her voice rising. I have the right to know what you really feel, Jungkook. I'm tired of pretending everything is fine here. Jungkook finally looked at Yin, his expression tense. I never asked for this marriage, at least not now when I'm still busy managing everything. I have bigger responsibilities than just trying to make you happy all the time. Yin stood frozen, hearing those words. Tears started flowing endlessly. I didn't ask for much, Jungkook. I just want you to see me, listen to me, and acknowledge that I'm here. Is that too much to ask? Jungkook sighed heavily, frustrated. Yin, you don't understand the pressure I'm under. You always want me to be there for you, but you never think about all the things I have to carry outside of this. I have a lot of responsibilities. Then why did you marry me? Yin shouted, her sobs becoming more audible. Why did you let me hope if you don't even care? You should have refused the marriage from the start. Jungkook fell silent for a moment, then shook his head. I had no choice, just like you. You should have known that too. Those words were the culmination of all the pain Yin had been feeling. She took a few steps back, her heart feeling like it was being shattered. She wiped her tears, trying to compose herself. Fine, she said finally, her voice weakening. Then I won't trouble you anymore. From now on, I'll stop expecting anything from you. You can treat me like a stranger here. Yin, that's not what I meant. Jungkook tried to ease the tension, but it was too late. Yin had already turned around, walked to the side of the bed, and climbed onto it without saying anything else. That night, Jungkook didn't sleep in the bed. He sat on the sofa, watching Yin's back as she turned away from him. It felt like something was missing inside him, but he didn't know how to fix it. In his mind, he convinced himself that this was the best for both of them, but his heart wasn't completely sure. He had known Yin for a long time, and he knew how stubborn she was, always wanting to be close to him. And now, if Yin was giving up, Jungkook knew that she wasn't doing it with the belief that everything would be okay in the future. Since the night of their big argument, the house of Jungkook and Yin felt different. There used to be the sound of Yin's light footsteps, her soft murmurs when she spoke to their pet dog, or even her cheerful laughter, even though Jungkook would only respond with a small nod. All of that was now gone. Yin stopped trying to approach Jungkook. There were no more cheerful greetings when she came home, no more questions about whether he had eaten or what happened at work. Yin now spent more time reading novels. Losing herself in stories was more enjoyable to her than her real life. At first, Jungkook felt relieved. There were no more demands for attention that he thought were excessive, no more Yin constantly trying to talk to him. But as time passed, that feeling began to turn into emptiness. However, due to his somewhat high ego, Jungkook continued to dismiss those feelings. It was a quiet morning in a residential neighborhood, the air still fresh, and the sky clear with no clouds. Jungkook was wearing simple sportswear and running shoes. His breath was steady, his steps light, but his mind was full. Sunday mornings were his time to escape from his heavy routine, at least for a while. Meanwhile, Yin, feeling lonely at home, decided to take a walk that morning. She walked slowly on the other side of the street with a small Pomeranian dog named Coco, whom she had adopted a few months ago. Her gaze was vacant, even though her hand held the leash tightly. The feeling of loneliness that had lingered since her argument with Jungkook continued to haunt her thoughts. Not long after, the person who had been on her mind appeared, casually jogging past her. Jungkook, jogging, passed by as if they were two people who didn't know each other. Yin sighed softly. They hadn't really talked much since that incident. Their conversations were minimal, but she couldn't blame anyone except herself. She looked down and kept walking slowly. He didn't even want to greet me, even for a moment. What a cold, annoying man, Yin mumbled as she continued her leisurely walk. However, a few seconds later, a sound shattered the silence behind them. The roar of a car echoed loudly, approaching quickly from the road. Yin looked up, turning her head sharply toward the noise, her eyes widening. A black car sped down the street at a dangerous speed, moving recklessly, seemingly aiming to swerve close to, or even hit, something or someone. Yin saw the car heading straight for Jungkook, who was a few meters ahead of her. Her heart stopped for a moment. Instinct took over. Jungkook, watch out, Yin screamed, running as fast as she could toward him. Jungkook, hearing her desperate shout, reflexively turned around. What? Before he could process the situation, Yin had already pushed him with all her strength, sending him sprawling far off the road. But his eyes immediately locked on her, who was thrown in the opposite direction. Her body collided violently with the car, flinging her onto the asphalt road. The sickening sound of her impact echoed as her head hit the ground hard, leaving a streak of blood where she landed. "Yin!" Jungkook shouted, his voice filled with panic. He scrambled to his feet and sprinted to where Yin lay motionless on the road, kneeling beside her. His hands trembled as he tried to wake her. Trickled from her temple, blending into her loose hair. "Yin, open your eyes," Jungkook pleaded, gently shaking her shoulder, his voice hoarse with fear. "Yin, please, answer me." Their small dog, Coco, barked frantically nearby, while the mansion's guards rushed to the scene, their faces frozen in shock at what they witnessed. "Call an ambulance now," Jungkook yelled at anyone who approached, his expression consumed by anxiety. He pressed his hands against the wound on Yin's head, desperately trying to stop the bleeding, but his efforts were in vain. A few moments later, the sound of ambulance sirens pierced the stillness of what should have been a peaceful morning. Paramedics jumped out and quickly approached Yin, who lay unconscious. Jungkook hesitated to let her go, but he knew they had to act fast. "How is she?" Jungkook asked with a shaky voice, his eyes red from holding back tears. One of the paramedics replied, "We need to get her to the hospital immediately. She's losing a lot of blood." Without a second thought, Jungkook climbed into the ambulance with Yin. During the ride, he held her hand tightly, whispering between his erratic breaths. "Yin, please don't leave me. I'm begging you. Stay with me. I promise I'll be there for you from now on. Only for you." But Yin remained silent, the only sound in the ambulance being the steady beeping of medical equipment. At that moment, as Jungkook's steady hand held Yin's fragile one, for the first time, he realized that a world without Yin was something he could neither imagine nor accept. Jungkook sat restlessly on the bench outside the operating room. The hospital atmosphere was suffocating to him, the sharp smell of antiseptic, the hurried steps of doctors and nurses, and the monotonous beeping of medical equipment filled the air. His hands were clenched tightly, palms damp with cold sweat. Dark thoughts swirled relentlessly in his mind. Since Yin was rushed to the hospital and is now undergoing surgery, why did this have to happen? He muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. The image of Yin lying motionless on the asphalt, pooling around her, kept replaying in his head like a nightmare he couldn't escape. He rubbed his face roughly, trying to calm down, but it was impossible. Every so often, his eyes darted to the closed doors of the operating room, hoping that the doctor would emerge with good news. Finally, the doors opened, and a doctor stepped out with a serious expression. Jungkook quickly stood up, walking briskly toward him. "Doctor, how is she? How is my wife?" he asked, his voice frantic, his eyes pleading for reassurance. The doctor removed his medical mask and sighed. "Her injuries are quite severe, especially to her head. She lost a lot of blood, but we managed to stop the bleeding. She is stable now." Jungkook felt a small weight lift from his chest, but he knew it wasn't over. Will she be okay?" The doctor looked at him for a moment before answering. "We detected trauma to her brain due to the severe impact. The worst case scenario, though not certain yet, is that she might experience temporary amnesia, judging by the severity of the impact and damage to her head." Those words hit Jungkook like a hammer. "Amnesia? My wife has amnesia? You mean she might lose her memory?" he repeated, almost unable to believe what he was hearing. The doctor nodded. "This is only a preliminary diagnosis, sir. To confirm it, we need to wait until the patient regains consciousness." Jungkook's face turned pale, and panic overtook him, but the doctor immediately tried to reassure him. However, this type of amnesia, post-traumatic amnesia PTA, is usually temporary and can heal over time, especially with stimulation from familiar people and surroundings. "I recommend being patient and helping her recall important things to speed up her recovery." Jungkook felt his knees weaken. He almost collapsed onto the floor, but managed to hold himself up. Finally, he gave a slow nod, though his head felt heavy with worry. He whispered a faint thank you before the doctor returned to the operating room. A few hours later, Jungkook stepped into the hospital room where Yin was being treated. His body trembled slightly as he pushed the door open, revealing Yin lying on the hospital bed. Her face was pale, but her breathing had stabilized. Her petite frame looked fragile beneath the white blanket. "Yin," Jungkook called softly, approaching her bedside. To his relief and surprise, Yin was awake. She slowly opened her eyes and looked at him. Her gaze was blank, void of the familiar spark he was used to seeing whenever their eyes met. Jungkook's heart sank. He prayed that the doctor's prediction wasn't true. He desperately hoped his wife would remember him. But then, "Who are you?" Yin furrowed her brows, trying to recall something. Her voice was soft, but her words felt like daggers stabbing his chest. Jungkook swallowed hard, trying to steady his voice. "Yin, it's me, Jungkook, your husband." Yin's eyes widened slightly, but not because the name sparked any memory. Instead, confusion painted her expression. "Jungkook, husband? Am I married to you?" Jungkook could only nod, even though his heart felt like it was shattering. "Yes, we've been married for 3 months, but you and we've been together for much longer." Yin shook her head, her eyes clouded with uncertainty. "Why don't I remember?" she asked, her voice tinged with unease as she stared at him cautiously. Jungkook inhaled deeply, trying to hold back his tears. Seeing Yin like this, afraid, confused, and not recognizing him, hurt more than anything he had ever experienced. He tentatively reached out to take her hand, but hesitated, worried he might make her feel even more uncomfortable. "Yin, please listen to me," he said gently. "You don't need to be afraid of me. The doctor said this is only temporary, and I'll be here to help you remember. I promise you won't go through this alone. You'll remember everything soon, I'm sure of it." Yin continued to look at him warily. Are you sure we were close? That you're my husband? I feel like a stranger to you." Jungkook gave her a faint smile, though it was laced with bitterness. "Closer than close. We have so many memories together, and I'll make sure you remember all of them." He slowly reached for her hand and held it gently, hoping his touch would bring her some comfort. Thankfully, Yin didn't pull away, though her confusion remained. "All right," she said at last. "Help me remember everything." Jungkook smiled, unable to stop the tears that finally spilled down his cheeks. Slowly and carefully, he leaned in to embrace her fragile form, pressing a soft kiss to her bandaged head with utmost care. "I will, Yin, I'll make you remember, because I can't bear the thought of you forgetting me," he whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. A few days later, since Yin returned home from the hospital, Jungkook had been keeping his promise. Now, they were sitting together in the garden behind the mansion. Their parents had just left after visiting Yin, leaving the couple alone to enjoy some quiet time together. "In the past," Jungkook began, "you used to insist that I relax like this." Yin turned to him, her brows furrowed. "Really?" Jungkook nodded with a faint smile. "Yes, you always said I needed to relax more because I was too busy." Yin didn't respond right away, her gaze instead drifting to the flowers around them. Her expression remained blank. "And you loved flowers," Jungkook added. "To you, every flower was beautiful, even though I thought they were just ordinary. Since we were kids, I often accompanied you to look at flowers in the garden." "Really?" Yin asked, now intrigued. Jungkook nodded again. "Wait here for a moment. I'll show you something." He stood and disappeared briefly into the mansion, returning moments later with a few photo albums in hand. "Yin, look at this," he said, handing her a photo. "This was taken when we were in middle school. Do you recognize this place?" Yin stared intently at the photo. It showed 2 teenagers, a girl with her hair tied in a ponytail, smiling brightly, and a boy beside her who looked awkward. They were standing in front of a playground. "This is me?" Yin asked hesitantly. Jungkook nodded. "Yes, that's you. And that's me next to you. You used to make me play on the swings, even though I said I was too big for them." Yin let out a faint smile, though her eyes still held confusion. "I don't remember at all, but you look annoyed in this photo." Jungkook chuckled. "That's because you wouldn't stop dragging me to play. But deep down, I was happy. You always managed to make me forget the things that stressed me out." Yin lowered her gaze, running her fingers along the edge of her teacup. "I wish I could remember all of that, Jungkook. I feel like a stranger in my own body." Jungkook looked at her gently. "You don't have to force yourself. I'm here to help you. One step at a time. We'll remember everything together." How did we end up married? Were we dating? From the photos, it looks like we've known each other since childhood," Yin asked, her curiosity piqued. Jungkook smiled, his eyes seemingly lost in the memories of the past. "Actually, we got married because of an arranged marriage, but we've been close since we were kids. You always stuck to me, and oddly enough, I couldn't bring myself to push you away. Over time, I realized I didn't want you to go away. There was a time back in college when you tried to distance yourself because you were upset, but I couldn't let that happen. And eventually, I came to realize that I genuinely enjoyed having you close." Yin looked at him, their gazes softening as they locked eyes. "Is that really how it was?" she asked, wanting reassurance. Jungkook nodded with a smile. He reached for her hand and kissed it gently. I'm sorry, baby. Before this, we had an argument. Maybe some of the things I said hurt you that night, but from now on, I promise to spend more time with you. Yin's cheeks flushed. Why did Jungkook's words sound so sweet? A part of her couldn't wait to remember everything. Since that day, Jungkook often brought Yin to the places where they used to spend time together from childhood to college. He didn't give up, continuously trying to help Yin regain her memories. He told her many stories about their sweet moments together. Until one night, Yin was fast asleep, with one of Jungkook's arms wrapped around her waist. Her breathing grew heavy, and beads of sweat started forming on her temple. Feeling her uneven breathing, Jungkook woke up, concerned as he saw how restless Yin was in her sleep. Was she having a nightmare? Unable to bear seeing her like that, Jungkook gently shook her awake. Baby, wake up. Open your eyes, baby. Yin jolted awake, her eyes locking immediately with Jungkook's worried gaze. Without hesitation, she sat up and hugged him tightly. I had a dream. Someone hit me with a black car. My head hurt so much in that dream. Jungkook, they were trying to hurt you, Yin said breathlessly, her voice trembling. Hearing this, Jungkook was stunned. Did Yin finally remember everything? Slowly, he released her hug and stared seriously into her eyes. Baby, that wasn't a dream. It really happened. Yin, have you remembered everything? He asked, full of curiosity and hope. Yin remained silent, her eyes closed, as memories began flooding back into her mind. Suddenly, she looked at Jungkook with fear. Jungkook, someone tried to kill you. They purposely aimed at you that day. Once again, Jungkook was shocked. It was clear that Yin had remembered. Without another word, he pulled her into a tight embrace. Thank God, you've finally remembered everything, baby. A sense of relief washed over him. And don't worry, Jungkook whispered softly but firmly, I've taken care of that person. They won't harm us again. Yin let out a sigh of relief, her lips curving into a smile, though tears began streaming down her cheeks. I remember since we were little how you've always been there for me, protecting me, keeping me safe. I remember how much I love you, ever since back then. Jungkook kissed the top of her head repeatedly, his voice filled with emotion. I love you too, baby. I'm sorry it took me so long to realize it, but now I know, I can't lose you. Yin smiled, slowly pulling back from their embrace, gazing at her husband's handsome face. It feels like it's been so long. I missed you so much, Jungkook. Jungkook smiled warmly, his hand gently caressing her soft cheek. I missed you too. Slowly, Jungkook leaned in and kissed Yin's lips tenderly, those lips that had become an irresistible addiction for him since they got married. That night, they truly reunited, pouring out all the longing they had for each other.